Right. Well, the uh, Biennale has had a marvelous history in the ceramic community. From its very beginning, it attracted enormous attention and was seen as the central event in the calendar of ceramics globally, and very quickly established that, which was extraordinary. And it showed that there was commitment not just to ceramics, which is clearly a very popular art form in Korea, but also to an international field to ensure that standards are raised, that there is competition, that there is new input, and particularly that there is a strong focus for ceramics in East Asia. And I think the Biennale has been extraordinarily successful in making that mark very quickly. And the challenge then has been to sustain that momentum to ensure that the ability of the Biennale to become a centre of ceramics is retained. And that seems to have been so, that it still continues to be a mecca, a pilgrimage for ceramicists, and one that they go to each year. And of course, the thematic has been changing, and there is always an interest to see what new ideas emerge. And there's been a lot of focus on the ceramic medium itself in terms of the elements of fire and earth and so on, particularly the last Biennale. And I think we see an interesting turn now when we look to the role of ceramics in society. And I think this reflects a more networked.
And this leads to the next question, which is based on the theme for the 2013 Biennale. As you know, the theme has been set as community with me, with you, with us. What is your opinion on this? Do you think it's appropriate for the present phenomenon that's taking place universally?
I think the theme of community is a critical one today, and I certainly commend the Biennale for taking it up because it reflects the way in which the world has become increasingly networked. We see this particularly through social media like Facebook and Twitter and other platforms that exist in East Asia. But we also see it in the way in which the internet is making our lives more interconnected. Globalization is ensuring that the products and services that we use in our daily lives now cover a wider part of the world in terms of the supply chains. So community is a very important one where we look to the role that different art forms play in society. But I think it's a big challenge because traditionally in the modern context, ceramics is seen as a studio practice and it's relatively isolated. It's an artist working at the bench, at the wheel, in the kiln, detached from other people. And of course, the products that they make will be enjoyed by other people in art galleries and in shops and in their homes and so on. But the actual world of the ceramicist, him or herself, is still quite remote and isolated. And I think the challenge for us is to think about how we value what a ceramicist does when we're looking at its role in the broader society. It's possible to look at a beautiful work of ceramics itself and to see that it has artistic value as an object that we admire for its technique and for its beauty, its inherent beauty. But nowadays we also look to see what value that object has as a means to connect people together, as a way in which people can have a shared experience. And ceramics does this very well. Certainly when we eat off ceramics, we are connected through the bowls and plates and so on that we eat from. How can we translate that to the way art functions? And this is a big issue in ceramics at the moment, and I certainly think that it's important that the Biennale here takes on that challenge. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds, both in the exhibitions as well as the talks and the symposia.
And for the artists, do you think it's a good way to bring them out and also consolidate with sometimes?
Yes, well, I think to share this issue and to look at new models is important. That's as a meeting point, that's always going to be quite critical. And I think looking at the artists that have been selected for this Biennale, I think they represent very interesting, innovative practices. And I think the Korean as well as the international audiences will really enjoy seeing how they can engage and participate in ceramics, not just as a viewer looking at works on a plinth, but also as someone participating as well.
The next question is based on the present condition of the ceramic industry as such, including art markets, academic environments, education. The universal phenomenon at the moment is that basically all aspects of ceramics are struggling somewhat, and this is not different in Korea either. How do you see the future development of ceramics?
Well, I think one of the issues I think ceramics has to face is the issue of isolation. And the new generation, the young generation, have much less tolerance for being on their own and disconnected. And there's a practical issue there with ceramics that it's a very wet medium, so it's hard to be using your iPhones and your Samsung phones and so on when you're working like that. I'm sure some people adapt through Bluetooth and so on. But I think seeing how ceramics can be something which is a shared experience is very important. Certainly it is challenged. I think one of the challenges is that in our very distracted and fast-paced world, the time and space to sit down and to learn the skill that it takes to master a medium like clay is becoming quite rare. And people these days multitask. They like to do many things at once. But whereas ceramics requires focus and concentration, and fewer people find that they have space for that. But I think now with globalization we have the opportunity to connect our world with that of the world of the village. And certainly in Asia and in continents like Africa and Latin America, there are still huge numbers of village ceramicists and potters using traditional techniques. And we begin to see artists now working in collaboration with those people in villages, so that they who have the time to be able to focus and specialize in this medium can be connected through commissions and collaborations with broader audiences. And I think this has a number of opportunities. We've seen a lot of it so far in not just ceramics but in visual arts. People like Ai Weiwei, for instance, working in Jingzhijian. So I think this is a growing field. It's an issue partly in terms of the art quality, because the artist isn't the one who makes the work themselves, but they commission others. But I think that's still a creative value to be able to know how to bring out the best in others. But it's also now an ethical issue, because there is often an imbalance in terms of the rewards that are gained from this, that people obviously who are in villages and produce are paid a lot less than the artist who gets the commission or whatever. And there's a natural logic in that, but we still need to always look at the way in which the people who are involved in these projects benefit themselves from it, and they're not just cheap labour. So I think telling the story of it, documentaries as Ai Weiwei does about his projects in Jingzhijian, are very important. So I think this is an avenue that is increasing for ceramics, and I think the theme of community is a good opportunity to explore this further.
Thank you. And finally, if you have any comments and suggestions that you wish to make for the improvement of the Biennale, please state your opinion.
Yes. Well, I think one of the keys to the Biennale is going to be the opportunity to discuss. And I think, as well as individual presentations, it's quite good to have a panel, to have argument. And I know that sometimes when you have differences of opinion, it can seem quite awkward because it's a sign that there is disharmony. But I think creativity can often come from disharmony, from differences coming together. And if we have a common belief in the importance of ceramics, then those sorts of differences can lead to a better understanding. And I think the difference between the relational value of ceramics, its role in society, and the artistic value of ceramics, which is its role as art for its own sake, that we need to have this argument. We need to have the purists who believe that art should be pure of anything else, and those who are social activists and so on, who think that ceramics should play a role in society, that it would be lovely to hear these both sides. And I'm sure that that would enrich the discussion, and we would end up with a better understanding as a result of that. But I think other forms of participation are quite important, performances and so on that engage audiences in the experience of clay are very good. But I think in terms of the discussion, it's sometimes good also to hear from people outside of ceramics. And they can offer a framework or a different point of view. Sociologists, even fiction writers and so on. I think sometimes our field can become quite insular, and it's having some fresh perspectives from outside can be quite important.